In this video, an awful homeowner association president repeatedly stole my electricity and called the police on me when I locked her out of my property. Let's dive right into the video. Welcome back to Ripe Stories. The first one is titled, Am I the jerk for taking legal action against an HOA president who stole my electricity and tried to force me to join their association? So I, 42 male, own a house on the outskirts of a city in the Philippines. My property has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built this house in the 1960s and I inherited it from my parents. About 2 years ago, a developer bought the land next to mine and built this fancy gated community. They called it Golden Heights Estates, which is not a real name. But that is when my troubles began, mainly in the form of their HOA president, who I will call Karen. The first time I met Karen was when she showed up at my gate in her huge SUV, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She had this fake evilish smile plastered on her face. Hello, I'm Karen, president of Golden Heights HOA. We are updating our community guidelines, and since your property is adjacent to ours, we would like to discuss your integration into our association. I politely explained to her that my property predated their development and I had no interest in joining their HOA. Well, let's just say she didn't take it well. But surely you understand that your rustic property affects our community's aesthetics, right? We got strict standards to maintain property values. Many of our residents are OFWs who invested their life savings here. And I think Ripe Stars OFWs are Filipinos that work abroad and send money back to the Philippines, something like that. I answered, I understand, but my answer is still no. My house has been here for over 60 years, long before your development even existed. Her smile tightened. We'll see about that. Over the next few months, I started getting letters about my so-called violations. Apparently, my mango trees were too tall, my gate was not the approved style, and my chicken coop was unsightly. I ignored them all since I was not part of their HOA, but then I noticed something odd about my electricity bills. They kept getting higher and higher even though my usage had not changed. I work in construction management, so I know a thing or two about utilities. One weekend I decided to investigate, and what I found made my blood boil. Someone had tapped into my power line near where it connected to the main grid. The connection was hidden behind some bushes, and it led straight to the HOA's guardhouse and their fancy entrance gate with all its lights and security cameras. I took photos and videos of everything and then called Meralco, our power company, to document the theft. The technician who came out confirmed it was an illegal connection and documented everything officially. The next day I went to confront Karen at the HOA office. She was sitting there like some queen on her throne, barely looking up from her phone. Yes, what is it? I found the illegal connection to my power line. I want it removed immediately and I want you to pay for all the electricity you've stolen. She laughed, actually laughed in my face. Oh, don't be dramatic. Your property benefits from our security measures. Besides, as the wealthiest development in this area, we got certain privileges. You should be honored to contribute to our community's safety. I said, well, that's not how any of this works. What you're doing is theft. She leaned forward, her fake smile gone. Listen here. Do you know who my husband is? Do you know who our residents are? We are not some squatters you can push around. You either cooperate with us or things will become very difficult for you. I reported the theft to the police, but Karen somehow managed to get the investigation stalled. And that is when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I hired contractors to build a tall concrete fence around my entire property and installed a heavy-duty gate with a proper lock. I also had security cameras installed covering every angle. The day after the fence went up, Karen showed up with 2 police officers screeching about how I was denying access to an important person, aka her. This man is endangering our community, she yelled. He built this illegal fence and is preventing me, a VIP, from accessing necessary utilities. The older police officer looked at my property papers and then at the photos of the illegal electrical connection I discovered. He turned to Karen with the most beautiful look of disdain I've ever seen. Ma'am, this is private property. The owner has every right to fence it. And based on these photos, you've been stealing his electricity. Would you like to file a formal complaint? Because he certainly could file one against you. Karen's face went through about 5 different colors. "Do you know who I am? I will have your badge for this. This is unacceptable." The younger officer couldn't help but smirk. "Ma'am, please calm down or we will have to take you in for disturbing the peace." And that is when I decided to really teach her a lesson. I worked with Meralco to calculate exactly how much electricity they had stolen from me over the past months. Then I had my lawyer draft a formal demand letter including back payment for all stolen electricity, costs for removing the illegal connection, installation costs for my security measures, legal fees, and of course damages for harassment. The total came to just over $8,000, aka 450,000 pesos. When Karen received the letter, she stormed over to my house again, this time with her husband in tow. He was some kind of businessman type in an expensive suit. "This is extortion," she screamed through my gate. "We will sue you for everything you have." I calmly replied through the intercom I had installed. "Please feel free to explain to a judge how you illegally tapped into my power line." Her husband actually looked at the documents that she was waving around and went pale. "Karen, shut up, get in the car now." "But honey, now." The next day, I received a visit from one of the other HOA board members, a much more reasonable woman named Monica. She looked embarrassed and said, "Sir, I want to apologize on behalf of the board. We had no idea Karen was doing this." She told us that she had arranged a proper utility connection with the city. So it turned out that Karen had been pocketing the money that was supposed to go towards their utility bills. She had been stealing my electricity for months while collecting fees from residents for infrastructure maintenance. The HOA held an emergency meeting, Karen was removed as president and they agreed to pay my demand in full to avoid a lawsuit. She was also required to repay the HOA for all the money she had embezzled from them. Last I heard, Karen and her husband had to sell their house and move. Apparently they could not afford to stay in the community after paying back everything they owed. The new HOA president is actually quite nice. She even asked permission before trimming some branches from my mango tree that hung over their wall. But here is where I might be the a-hole. Some people, including my sister, say that I went too far. They say I could have just accepted a smaller payment or worked out a payment plan that would not have forced Karen and her husband to sell their house. They say that I've embarrassed her family and ruined their reputation in the community. I say she brought this on herself by stealing from me and trying to bully me into submission. But maybe I could have been more lenient. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole here? And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Do you think OP was being the a-hole here to this totally innocent Karen or not? I would say OP was definitely not the a-hole, he did everything right. But honestly, I would have instantly tried to sue Karen for what she did here. You should not let anyone steal your electricity. OP further said, so some people are asking about the actual numbers. Over 8 months they stole approximately 180,000 pesos worth of electricity. The rest of the demanded amount was for the security measures I had to install, 150,000 pesos, legal fees 70,000 and damages 50,000. And now a comment from Reddit that read, "Anti-A, she stole from you, tried to intimidate you when caught and then played the victim. She faced the consequences of her own actions, don't feel bad about it for a second." Another comment said, "Anti-A, let me get this straight. She illegally tapped your power, tried to force you into their HOA, threatened you with her connections and then acted surprised when there were consequences? The audacity of some people is amazing." And another person said, "This is like a classic HOA president power trip but taken to a criminal level. She didn't just try to enforce petty rules, she committed actual theft and fraud against both you and her own HOA members. You did the whole community a favor by exposing her." Update to the story. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post 6 months ago, and since many people have been messaging me asking for updates, I figured I should share how this all played out. First off, thank you all for your supportive comments. You helped me stay firm when people were pressuring me to be more understanding about the situation. And by the way guys, how can you be understanding when someone is stealing your electricity? There's nothing to be understanding about there. Anyway, you were right, theft is theft no matter who does it or why. So here's what happened after my last post. Remember how Karen and her husband had to sell their house? Well, apparently they did not go quietly. About a week after they moved out, I got served with a lawsuit. Karen was suing me for emotional distress and damage to reputation, claiming I had deliberately set out to humiliate her and destroy her standing in the community. The lawsuit was honestly ridiculous. She wanted 2 million pesos, $36,000 in damages, claiming that my excessive and punitive demands had forced them to sell their house at a loss and move to a less prestigious neighborhood. She even tried to argue that the illegal electrical connection was actually a verbal agreement we had made and that I had maliciously changed my story to destroy her reputation. I immediately called my lawyer, Anna, who had handled the original case. When she read the lawsuit, she actually laughed. "This is perfect," she said. She just opened the door for us to file a countersuit and bring up everything she did. Anna explained that by filing this lawsuit, Karen had basically given us the opportunity to get everything on official court record. We filed a countersuit for defamation. She had been spreading lies about me in the community, harassment, all those fake HOA violation letters, additional damages for the continued stress and legal fees. And here's the kicker, we included a criminal complaint for the utility theft. "But I thought we had settled that with the payment," I asked Anna. "The HOA settled the civil damages," she explained, "but utility theft is still a crime. By filing this lawsuit, she is basically admitting that she did it. She's just trying to justify it. That is exactly what we need." The day of the first hearing was interesting. Karen showed up with a new lawyer, not looking quite as polished as she used to. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced with a simple business suit. Her husband was not with her this time. Her lawyer tried to argue that I had explicitly agreed to share utilities by not immediately noticing the connection. Anna shut that down fast by presenting the original Meralco documentation showing the connection was deliberately hidden. Then we presented our evidence, photos and videos of the illegal connection, the Meralco technician's report, security camera footage of Karen directing workers to install the connection, and copies of all the threatening letters she had sent. Also recordings of her threats, thank goodness for security cameras with audio, bank records showing the spike in my electricity bills, and testimonies from HOA members about her embezzlement. The judge was not amused by this. "Sir, your client is attempting to sue someone for exposing her own criminal behavior. Are you sure you want to continue with this line of argument?" Her lawyer asked for a brief recess. When we came back, they tried to withdraw the lawsuit, but Anna objected. "Your Honor, we would like to proceed with our countersuit. My client has been subjected to months of harassment and financial damage, and now this frivolous lawsuit has caused additional stress and expense." The judge agreed. That is when Karen's lawyer really started sweating. Over the next few weeks, more details came out. The real breakthrough came when Monica, the reasonable HOA board member I mentioned before, came forward with more evidence. She had documentation showing that Karen had been running various scams within the HOA, for example, collecting special assessments for improvements that never happened, hiring her friends' companies for overpriced maintenance work, using HOA funds for personal expenses. During one hearing, Karen completely lost it. She started screaming in the courtroom about how everyone was against her, how she was the victim, and how we were all just jealous of her success. The judge had to threaten her with contempt of court to get her to calm down. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement, but Anna advised me to push forward. "She tried to destroy your reputation with this lawsuit," she said. "Let's make sure there's an official record of everything she did." The judge's final ruling was even better than we could have hoped for. So Karen's original lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. She was ordered to pay all my legal fees for both cases, and the court awarded me 1.5 million pesos in damages for harassment and defamation. After the ruling, Karen's husband finally showed up to serve her with divorce papers. It turns out this whole lawsuit was the last straw for him. He'd had no idea that she was filing it and only found out when his own lawyer, who he had consulted about the declining finances, saw the court records. The divorce filing revealed that Karen had been lying to him about their finances for years. The money she had embezzled from the HOA, well, that was just the tip of the iceberg. She had taken out loans in his name, maxed out credit cards he didn't know about, and basically created a financial house of cards that was now collapsing. Last week, I received the first payment from the court judgment. Karen's husband's lawyer contacted me to arrange a payment plan for the rest. Apparently, he is legally liable for half of it since they were married when all this happened. He actually apologized to me in person, saying he should have paid more attention to what she was doing. As for the HOA, they have completely reorganized since then. Monica is the new president and they have implemented strict financial controls to prevent anything like this from happening again. They also hired an independent auditor to go through all their books. The funniest part though? My property value has actually gone up because of all of this. Apparently, having a well-documented case of standing up to HOA overreach makes a property even more attractive to buyers who don't want to deal with overzealous associations. Karen is now living with her sister in a different city. I heard she tried to join their subdivision's HOA board, but was rejected when they googled her name and found news articles about our case. Sometimes karma works exactly as it should. And the next one is a story from r/FHOA, and it is titled, "My HOA decided I cannot have things I enjoy in my backyard." And by the way, if you enjoy these HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much. So I live in a very small HOA where almost all of the houses are in a straight line on one side of our road. I live halfway down the road with a lake on each side of my lot that takes up most of the backyards of the other homes. I also like trees, so many neighbors designed their homes so they see my tree-filled yard across the lakes from inside their homes. Initially, some neighbors did not even have curtains on their windows facing my backyard. Several people on our architecture committee disliked that I saw into their yards and homes when I was in my backyard, so they decided I couldn't have anything I enjoy in my yard that is not right beside my house, to keep me out of most of my backyard basically. They even put this as a reason for rejecting improvements. One committee member said she liked to change her disabled daughter's diapers where she could see into my yard and rejected the structure in the back of my yard because I would be able to see back. The thought of adding curtains and closing them was foreign to her. She and others were also furiously against me putting up a privacy fence because it would block their view into my yard. The first improvement was a volleyball net for my daughter and me to get some exercise. A neighbor on the opposite side of one of the lakes had one that was never submitted to the HOA, but it could only be seen over the top of his 6-foot privacy fence. So then I put mine in a clearing among the trees in my backyard. It was the only level spot in my yard large enough. It turned out my volleyball net did not need HOA approval. The HOA board consulted 3 attorneys that all told them what they did was wrong. But the board put out minutes implying they were right. When legal threats did not work, they resorted to insults and said that I was a bad neighbor for not doing what they demanded. My HOA spent thousands in legal fees and was not able to block any of my improvements. This was not the only reason used for the rejections, but it was a frequent one and one of the most bizarre ones. And before we end the video, I will read some stories about HOAs from r/AskReddit that you have not heard before. So this lady is talking about her own HOA horror story. The comment starts like this. So my house flooded 2 months after I bought it. HOA got involved and blamed my kids putting toys down the toilet. They are too old for that. And I spoke to the neighbors and found out that 5 houses in a row had flooding. We then all got together and demanded an investigation by an independent plumber. Long story short, our HOA owns the sewage and water lines under all the houses that connect to city water. They had not been repaired for years or even flushed out and were made of a material that eroded underground. It backflowed raw sewage into the 5 houses affected and flooded the grassy areas with sewage as well. All my neighbors are senior citizens and the HOA admitted responsibility and held an emergency meeting to repair damage. My house was done last and I agreed with that because the other ladies are 70 plus and wheelchair bound or disabled and I am under 40. By the time my house was done, the sewage had been swiped up from the tile floor and treated with fungal chemicals, but mold was growing in the master shower and the carpet was destroyed. They had to replace new carpet in bedrooms, drywall, paint new drywall a color I chose, and retile my whole shower. When the old shower tile was torn out, plumbing was not to code, so that was done too. So all in all, they spent about $15,000 on my house alone. I also told the HOA to never accuse my kids again. And in the next HOA horror story someone says, my grandfather lived in a small community of 1-story townhouses. There was a lady that we called the traffic Nazi. There was literally one street that ran a block down the community, and she was outside every time that we came to visit Grandpa. She would run you down, yell at you, and threaten to call the cops if you went 1 mile over the speed limit. She walked around every day trying to find little infractions to fine everyone with. Never saw her have visitors, probably just a coincidence. For real though, she was super impressive at judging your speed. 21 miles per hour, you're getting yelled at. 20 miles per hour, you're getting a sneer but no yelling. 15 miles per hour or less, wouldn't call it a smile, but the nicest expression I ever saw her make. 25 miles per hour though? She was gonna call the cops on you, which would have to come out, but could not give a ticket because, well, there's no proof. And the last mini HOA horror story starts like this. So, a friend of mine lived in an HOA neighborhood, but because this house had been in the family for generations, before the neighborhood was even there really, they were not part of the HOA, they never had to join. This homeowner association only formed a few years ago, but apparently did not realize that my friend, let's call him Bob, had not even been told about the HOA. Bob is single and travels a lot, but he comes home one day to find a total of $13,000 in fines for his house being the wrong color. Also, his deck being unapproved and a bunch of other BS. So Bob outright refuses to even acknowledge the fines, just has the post office returned to sender. A few months later he comes home to see that his deck has been demolished and his house repainted. Apparently the HOA had granted itself the right to correct any violations of exterior appearance upon failure to pay the relevant fines. Unlucky for the HOA, Bob happens to be a former lawyer. He quit the practice a few years prior to help the family business, but Bob still knows how to lawyer. Bob then sues the HOA, and the HOA smugly thinks it is a clear-cut case in their favor. Bob only had to say a few words in his statement, most of which was, "I'm not effing part of the HOA." And the HOA ended up admitting liability and had to pay a bunch of fees and ended up disbanding. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, I hope I will see you again tomorrow.